In Search of the Miraculous by P.D. Ouspensky. Chapter 1. I did not meet G's group again. About himself, G spoke but little. Once or twice he mentioned his travels in the East. I was interested to know where he'd been, but this I was unable to make out exactly. In regard to his work in Moscow, G said that he had two groups unconnected with one another and occupied in different work according to the state of their preparation and their powers, as he expressed it. Each member of these groups paid 1,000 rubles a year and was able to work with him while pursuing his ordinary activities in life. I said that in my opinion 1,000 rubles a year might be too large a payment for many people without private means. G replied that no other arrangement was possible because, owing to the very nature of the work, he could not have many pupils. At that time he did not desire, and ought not, he emphasized this, to spend his own money on the organization of the work. His work was not and could not be of a charitable nature, and his pupils themselves ought to find the means for the hire of apartments where they could meet, carry out experiments, and so on. Besides this, he added, that observation showed that people who were weak in life proved themselves weak in the work. There are several aspects of this idea, said G. The work of each person may involve expenses, traveling, and so on. If this life is so badly organized that 1,000 rubles embarrasses him, it would be better not to undertake this work. Suppose that in the course of a year, this work requires him to go to Cairo or some other place. He must have the means to go. Through our demand, we find out whether he is able to work with us or not. Besides, G continued, I have far too little spare time to be able to sacrifice it on others without being certain even that it will do them any good. I value my time very much because I need it for my own work and because I cannot, and, as I said before, do not want to spend it unproductively. There is also another side to this, said G. People do not value a thing if they do not pay for it. I listened to this with a strange feeling. On the one hand, I was pleased with everything that G said. I was attracted by the absence of any element of sentimentality, of conventional talk about altruism, of words about working for the good of humanity, and so forth. On the other hand, I was surprised at G's apparent desire to convince me of something in connection with the question of money, when I needed no convincing. If there was anything I did not agree with, it was simply that G would be able to collect enough money in the way he described. I realized that none of those pupils whom I had seen would be able to pay 1,000 rubles a year. If he had really found in the East visible and tangible traces of hidden knowledge and was continuing investigations in this direction, then it was clear that this work needed funds, like any other scientific enterprise, like an expedition into some unknown part of the world, the excavation of an ancient city, or an investigation requiring elaborate and numerous physical or chemical experiments. It was quite unnecessary to convince me of this. On the contrary, the thought was already in my mind that if G gave me the possibility of a closer acquaintance with his activities, I should probably be able to find the funds necessary for him to place his work on a proper footing, and also to bring him more prepared people. But of course, I still had only a very vague idea of what his work might consist. Without saying it plainly, G gave me to understand that he would accept me as one of his pupils if I expressed the wish. I told him that the chief obstacle on my side was that at the moment I could not stay in Moscow because I had made an arrangement with a publisher in Petersburg and was preparing several books for publication. G told me that he sometimes went to Petersburg, and he promised to come there soon and let me know of his arrival. But if I joined your group, I said to G, I should be faced with a very difficult problem. I do not know whether you exact a promise from your students. to keep secret what they learn from you, but I could give no such promise. There have been 2 occasions in my life when I had the possibility of joining groups engaged in work which appears to be similar to yours, at any rate by description, which interested me very much at the time, but in both cases, to join would have meant consenting or promising to keep secret everything that I might learn there, and I refused in both cases, because before everything else, I am a writer, and I desire to be absolutely free and to decide for myself what I shall write and what I shall not write. If I promise to keep secret something I am told, it would be very difficult afterwards to separate what I have been told from what came into my own mind, either in connection with it or even with no connection. For instance, I know very little about your ideas yet, but I do know that when we begin to talk, we shall very soon come to the question of time and space, of higher dimensions, and so on. These are questions on which I already have been working for many years. I have no doubt whatever that they occupy a large place in your system. G nodded. Well, you see, if we were now to talk under the pledge of secrecy, then after the first conversation, I should know what I could write and what I could not write. But what are your ideas on the subject? Said G. One must not talk too much. There are things which are said only to disciples. I could accept such a condition only temporarily, I said. Of course, it would be ludicrous if I began to write at once about what I learned from you. But if in principle you do not wish me to make a secret of your ideas and care only that they should be transmitted in a distorted form, and should not be transmitted in a distorted form, then I could accept such a condition and wait until I had a better understanding of your teaching. I once came across a group of people who were engaged in various scientific experiments on a very wide scale. They made no secret of their work, but they made it a condition that no one would have the right to speak of or describe any experiment unless he was able to carry it out himself. Until he was able to repeat the experiment himself, he had to keep silent. But there could be no better formulation, said G, and if you keep such a rule, this question will never arise between us. Are there any conditions for joining your group? I asked. And is a man is a man who joins it tied to you? In other words, I want to know if he is free to go and leave your work, or does he take definite obligations upon himself, and how do you act towards him if he does not carry out his obligations? There are no conditions of any kind, said G, and there cannot be. Our starting point is that man does not know himself, that he is not. He emphasized these words. That he is, that is, he is not what he can and what he should be. For this reason, he cannot make any agreements or assume any obligations. He can decide nothing in regard to the future. Today, he is one person, and tomorrow another. He is in no way bound to us, and if he likes, he can at any time leave the work and go. There are no obligations of any kind, either in our relationship to him or in his to us. If he likes, he can study. He will have to study for a long time and work a great deal on himself. When he has learned enough, then it's a different matter. He will see for himself whether he likes our work or not. If he wishes, he can work with us. If not, he may go away. Up to that moment, he is free. If he stays after that, he will be able to decide or make arrangements for the future. For instance, take one point. A situation may arise, not of course at the beginning, but later on, when a man has to preserve secrecy, even if only for a time, about something that he has learned. But can a man who does not know himself promise to keep a secret? Of course, he can promise to do so, but can he keep his promise? For he is not one. There are many different people in him. One in him promises and believes that he wants to keep the secret. But tomorrow, another in him will tell it to his wife or to a friend over a bottle of wine, or a clever man may question him in such a way that he himself will not notice that he's letting out everything. Finally, he may be hypnotized, or he may be shouted at unexpectedly and frightened, and he will do anything you like. What sort of obligations can he take upon himself? No, with such a man we will not talk seriously. To be able to keep a secret, a man must know himself, and he must be. And a man, such as all men are, is far from this. Sometimes we make temporary conditions with people as a test. Usually they are broken very soon, but we never give any serious secret to a man we don't trust. So it does not matter much. I mean, it matters nothing to us, although it certainly breaks our connection with the man, and he loses his chance to learn anything from us. If there is anything to learn from us, also, it may affect all his personal friends, although they may not expect it. I remember that in one of my talks with G during the first week of my acquaintance with him, I spoke of my intention of going to the East. Is it worth thinking about, and can I find what I want there? I asked G. It is good to go for a rest, for a holiday, said G, but it is not worthwhile going there for what you want. All that can be found is here. I understood what he was speaking of, the work with him. But do not schools which are on the spot, so to speak, in the midst of all the traditions, offer certain advantages? I asked. In answering this question, G told me several things which I did not understand till later. Even if you found schools, you would find only philosophical schools, he said. In India, there are only philosophical schools. It was divided up in that way long ago. In India, there was philosophy. In Egypt, theory. And in present-day Persia, Mesopotamia, and Turkestan, practice. And does it remain the same now? I asked. In part, even now, he said, but you do not clearly understand what I mean by philosophy, theory, and practice. These words must be understood in a different way, not in the way that they are usually understood. But speaking of schools, there are only special schools. There are no general schools. Every teacher or guru is a specialist in some one thing. One is an astronomer, another is a sculptor, a third is a musician, and all pupils of each teacher must first study the subject in which he has specialized, and then afterwards another subject, and so on. It would take 1,000 years to study everything. But how did you study? I was not alone. There were all kinds of specialists among us. Everyone studied on the lines of his particular subject. Afterwards, when we foregathered, we put together everything we had found. And where are your companions now? G was silent for a time, and then he said slowly, looking into the distance, some have died, some are working, some have gone into seclusion. This word from the monastic language, heard so unexpectedly, gave me a strange and uncomfortable feeling. At the same time, I felt a certain acting in quotes, on G's part, as though he were deliberately trying from time to time to throw me a word that would interest me and make me think in a definite direction. When I tried to ask him more definitely where he had found what he knew, what the source of his knowledge was, and how far this knowledge went. He did not give me a direct answer. You know, G said once, when you went to India, they wrote about your journey and your aims in the paper. I gave my pupils the task of reading your books, of determining by them what you were, and of establishing on this basis what you would be able to end. So we knew what you would end while you were still on your way there. With this, the talk came to an end. I once asked G about the ballet, which had been mentioned in the papers and referred to in the story Glimpses of Truth, and whether the ballet would have the nature of a mystery play. My ballet is not a mystery, said G. The object I had in view was to produce an interesting and beautiful spectacle. Of course, there is a certain meaning hidden beneath the outward form, but I have not pursued the aim of exposing and emphasizing this meaning. An important part in the ballet is occupied by certain dances. I will explain this to you briefly. Imagine that in the study of the movements of the heavenly bodies, let's say the planets of the solar system, a special mechanism is constructed to give a visual representation of the laws of these movements and to remind us of them. In this mechanism, each planet, which is represented by a sphere of appropriate size, is placed at a certain distance from a central sphere representing the sun. The mechanism is set in motion, and all the spheres begin to rotate and to move along prescribed paths, reproducing in a visual form the laws which govern the movements of the planets. This mechanism reminds you of all you know about the solar system. There is something like this in the rhythm of certain dances. In the strictly defined movements and combinations of the dancers, certain laws are visually reproduced, which are intelligible to those who know them. Such dances are called sacred dances. In the course of my travels in the East, I have many times witnessed such dances being performed during sacred services in various ancient temples. Some of these dances are reproduced in the struggle of the magicians. Moreover, there are three ideas lying at the basis of the struggle of the magicians. But if I produce the ballet on the ordinary stage, the public will never understand these ideas. I understood from what he said subsequently that this would not be a ballet in the strict meaning of the word, but a series of dramatic and mimic scenes held together by a common plot, accompanied by music and intermixed with songs and dances. The most appropriate name for these scenes would be revue, but without any comic element. The ballet or revue was to be called the struggle of the magician. The important scenes represented the schools of a black magician and a white magician, with exercises by both pupils of both schools and a struggle between the two schools. The action was to take place against the background of the life of an Eastern city intermixed with sacred dances, dervish dances, and various national Eastern dances, all this interwoven with a love story, which itself would have an allegorical meaning. I was particularly interested when G said that the same performers would have to act and dance in the white magician scene and in the black magician scene, and that they themselves and their movements had to be attractive and beautiful in the first scene and ugly and discordant in the second. You understand that in this way they will see and study all sides of themselves. Consequently, the ballet will be of immense importance for self-study, said G. I understood this far from clearly at the time, but I was struck by a certain discrepancy. In the notice I saw in the papers, it was said that your ballet should be staged in Moscow, and that certain well-known ballet dancers would take part in it. How do you reconcile this with the idea of self-study? I asked. They will not play and dance in order to study themselves. All this is far from being decided, said G, and the author of the notice you read was not fully informed. All this may be quite different, although on the one hand, those taking part in the ballet will see themselves whether they like it or not. And who is writing the music? I asked. That also is not decided, said G. He did not say anything more, and I only came across the ballet again 5 years later. Once I was talking with G in Moscow. I was speaking about London, where I had been staying a short time before, about the terrifying mechanization that was being developed in the big European cities, and without which it was probably impossible to live and work in those immense whirling mechanical toys. People are turning into machines, I said, and no doubt sometimes they become perfect machines. But I do not believe that they can think. If they tried to think, they could not have been such fine machines. Yes, said G, that is true, but only partly true. It depends, first of all, on the question which mind they use for their work. If they use the proper mind, they will be able to think even better in the midst of their work with machines, but again only if they think with the proper mind. I did not understand what G meant by proper mind, and understood it only much later.